We all have stories, every single one of us. From the highest of the high to the lowest of the low, we all have stories. Exploring the world for the greatest stories of all time.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Aron O'Dowd Show.
The Aron O'Dowd Show. Our soul is the screen upon which we project our dreams. What's your story?
Morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody! Oh, that's that time of the day again where it's the Aron O'Dowd Show. Make sure you like, subscribe, and smash that like button like with a hammer, and boom! We've got an amazing guest as always. From film to radio to the military, he grew up with a family who... His father was a director, mother was an actress, brother was a stuntman, and wow, he's a radio presenter, and he's all about relationships. His name is Joseph Roth. Hello, welcome to the show, Joseph. How are you doing?
Hey, Aaron. Nice to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Joseph, you've had the glitz of Hollywood, the discipline of military, the pizzazz of radio. Tell us, what was the biggest lesson you learned in all that experience?
Aaron, I would say the biggest lesson I have learned is that you've got to try things that you're afraid to do. You got to get out there and put yourself out, let people get to know who you are, what you can do, and try things. And even though that you're not good at it yet, or you may not have very much success, you just get out there and do it. And that's what happened to me when I got into the movie business. My brother was a special effects man. I had just graduated college, and I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. And he said, why don't you come on down to Universal Studios? There's all kinds of jobs right now. And there were. Back then, things are different now. But back then, all the sound stages were full. They were actually renting out additional sound stages at other studios because we had so many shows going on. And I got hired into the special effects area, which was would be a dream for anybody. And I just kind of lucked in. But they put me on, and this is a long story, don't mean to take up too much time.
No.
But they put me on what was called the special effects truck, which was a truck that had all the misfits. We were guys that were green, didn't really know much about the studio business, motion picture and television business. And we had a guy that would scream and yell at us all day long as we were going to set to set to set. One minute would be on a show like The Rockford Files. The next minute I'd be on a show like Little Women. These are shows back in the 70s, so some of these shows were before your time probably. But we would just go around and set up snow scenes or fire scenes or rain. Those all had to be on cue according to what the director wanted. And you learn fast, but it was a great education. And the reason why I brought that up is because if I hadn't gone out there and tried to do something that I knew I was not good at and had no experience in, I never would have gotten where I was. And you talk about an unusual job doing things from moving airplanes to starting fires to snowing in entire streets. It was a very, very unusual job.
As someone grew up with a family in the industry, it must have been second nature to you in some way.
Well, no, my parents, my father was a director and what they call a drama coach. Today they would call him an acting coach. And they were more into the theater. They didn't do as much studio work as far as television and movies. My mother was an actress and she did plays and she directed as well. And my father would direct plays, but mostly he had students. If you're familiar with the Mary Tyler Moore Show, there was a gentleman by the name of Ted Knight that was played Ted Baxter on that show. He's a crazy news guy. He would come over for lessons. My dad was incapacitated. He couldn't walk very well. So people would come over to our house and you never know who would be there. But no, they weren't really involved with that. My brother John, he was the one who got into the studio business early age and was working. When you work for the studios out here, you belong to a union. And I was in Local 44, and so was he. And that enables you to go from studio to studio to studio. So you might be working at 20th Century Fox for a week, and then that you get laid off. That happens all the time. And then you might go to Universal from there. The studio would call, I mean, the union would tell you, hey, we've got another job. Would you be interested? So no, they were basically two separate entities, my parents and my brother and I.
And so you're working in the studio after college. Tell us about how you got into the military.
Well, the military was an accident, as it seems like most of my life was. The thing of it was is that I've been in sales for a long time. After I left, this is a long story, but I guess you're asking, so I'll tell you. After the studios, I wanted to find something that was more concrete, that was more regular. Because when you work for the studios, you might work for 6 months straight, working 12 hours a day, and then be laid off the next day. I had a family. So I asked myself, well, what can I go into that will be, and we'll get to the military in a minute, but what can I get into that's creative, business-like, sales-like? And radio sales came up through a friend. So I started working for radio stations, selling advertising for that particular station. And then after that started to calm down, I was approached by a company to work for them. It was actually in the furniture business. And I would be working on military projects. And that's where that came in. We would go into various bases all throughout the United States, as far away as the island of Guam, which I really enjoyed. And we would set up huge furniture systems for major projects that the military was involved with. So you kind of just move around and things happen accidentally, and they're all for good purpose.
I see you unpacking all these furniture in deserts and everything, setting up. That wasn't cool.
No, if you can think of modern system, like when we used to go, now and everything's changed since COVID, but when we used to go to the office, we had cubicles, right? We had cubicles all over the place. Well, all of that has to be designed, all of it has to be set up, it has to be to military standards. There's secrecy, there's all kinds of things. So it was a very interesting job. I worked with, I would say, thousands of military people over the period of 15 years.
What did you like about it?
The military, or
yeah, let's focus on the military first, and we'll kind of break it down into the acting and the radio, and then what you do as a relation coach.
Well, the military people are some of the finest people on earth. They're very honest. They're very down to earth. You work with them, and you're very proud to be a part of this, because they're both men and women that are doing these jobs, and they don't get paid well. That's the one thing. And they are ordered to go one day, into a completely different area, take their families with them. They're a true servant, and I really enjoyed working with them. And of course, being around all that military stuff. I'll give you a little quick story. I was in Hawaii at Pearl Harbor. One of the places that I would visit very often would be Pearl Harbor, or Hawaii, and Guam. And I'm out there at a restaurant that's right. I'm on the base. I'm right by the shore. I'm at the restaurant eating. It was the officers' club, and I look out, and there's a submarine taking off from one of the docks out of Pearl Harbor, and it's just something you don't see every day. In fact, I think I saw more things than other military people did, because if you're in the Army, you stay on an Army base. If you're in the Navy, you stay in a Navy base. Well, one day I'm in an Air Force base, next day I'm with Special Forces, next day I'm with the Coast Guard. So I'm seeing all this stuff, and it's just fascinating. So that's what I liked about that. But as far as radio, it gave me the chance to be creative and do sales at the same time. When you're selling advertising on a radio station, you're creating the spots. We call them spots or advertisements, same thing. And I got to voice a lot of those. And then they asked me to do a radio show, and I did that for 4 years. And I'm still doing radio now. I'm on once a week on Saturday on a radio show here in Los Angeles. But the creativity, working with very creative people who can do voices, who can voice act, who can create things off the top of their head, then getting rewarded handsomely sometimes when you sold a nice big contract. It just was a great mix of different things that you had to do for the radio station. So it's like I said, you kind of work in things, you try things. I was new to radio. when I first got the job. It took me 3 years for the radio station to finally hire me. I kept bugging them. And in the meantime, I would go to places like UCLA, which is a major university here, and take radio classes to prepare myself. And that's the other thing I would say: prepare yourself. If you want to go into something and you're not really there yet, start working with professional people, like where you and I met with Forbes Riley. This is the key. You work with professional people who already have their act together, and you learn from them, and you shave off a lot of years of unnecessary experience, or trying to get the experience because somebody else has already done it for you.
Basing the experience and learning how to use your voice as a tool, you probably came to understanding, hey, I've got a tool here. How can I mold it to be entertaining for people either listening to me on radio or sales in some way?
Yeah, you have to talk to somebody like a conversation. You have to speak. Let me back up. You should speak to somebody like it's a conversation, like you and I are having right now. There are announcers that you hear sometimes that I can't even imitate them, but they sound very, very blown up, and they don't sound real. And people are tired of that. People need to hear a human voice. I think radio is actually a better sales tool than television is, because the theater of the mind has to come into place when you're hearing the spot, the advertisement. And I wrote some spots that I kept on my station for actually a year. And that's a big no-no in radio. You don't do that. But because it was so effective with the sound effects and things of that nature and the voice, it kept getting my advertiser more and more business. And I must say, I'm not going to take this off them. It's working. And you don't remove a radio station ad because people are tired of hearing it. You remove it if it's not working. And it kept working and working and working. And that was all theater of the mind. It was a doctor. If you don't mind, I'll go into it real quick.
Yeah,
he was a doctor in the heart of Los Angeles. He was a black doctor. He specialized in internal medicine. And I interviewed, this is what I do with all my clients, I interviewed his business manager or the client themselves. And I said, what's different about this doctor? And he said, well, he still makes house calls. Now, that was very unusual for a doctor. You always went to the doctor yourself. You never had a doctor come to your house, and he still made house calls. So I created an ad where you hear a horse and carriage pull up, and that's the doctor coming off the carriage to come see you, like the olden days. And it had great music, and I had a great announcer who voiced it. And of course, I'm not doing it justice in the description I'm giving you, but it was excellent. And people responded to it because it was very human. A doctor still makes house calls. It's quite different from the sterile doctors that you go, I shouldn't say sterile doctors, but the sterileness of going to a hospital or a medical office building.
What was so special about your ads in communicating them, Joseph?
Well, I think that I really, really tried to think, what would somebody want to hear? What would somebody respond to? Paul McCartney was interviewed before. Was always interviewed, of course. And one of the things that caught my attention was he said, whenever I put together my performance, I think to myself, if I was in the audience, what would I hear? What hits would I want to hear me play? And that's how he decides on his set list when he does his concerts. And it's the same thing in my advertising or my radio copy. What's the button that I'm going to push that's going to make you happy? What's it? It's always the saying, what's in it for me? And that was what I went after. How can I make you feel like we have something that's going to be of use to you, not just something that's going to sit on your shelf and gather dust?
Wow, for sure. Everyone that's listening, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment as we can answer your questions. But Joseph, you're the communicator that fixes things. Tell us about how that came about for you.
Another accident, Aaron?
Oh, no way.
No, not really. Actually, what happened was, it's very interesting. About 3 years ago, the company that I was working for, and that was one of the companies that I did all the military stuff, it's when COVID happened and all hell broke loose. They started laying off complete divisions. They got very nervous. And one of the divisions they laid off was the military division, which was what I was in, and a few other the guys. And so I had gotten to a point where I decided, you know what, now it's time to do something that I want to do. I've helped people make hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars over the year in my sales practices. That's great. And I've been rewarded too. But now I want to do something that I find interesting. And I kept noticing, being a single guy, I kept noticing the mistakes that guys were making with girls. And it was just so blatantly obvious. And I thought, you really shouldn't have done that, or you really should do this. And I decided to form what was going to be called the Gentleman's Seminar. It was going to be for men only, to teach them how to work in the world of women. And then I thought, wait a minute, women are just as bad in a lot of sense because they don't understand men. And so I decided to put together the courses that you and I are talking about. And they're basically they are relationship building. I call them advanced relationship building because what we do is we go really a lot deeper. I've been to a number of the courses on relationships and dating and things like that. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good information, but they don't go as deep as I do. And so one of the things that will differentiate me from, say, another course is that I look at what makes up a woman internally and what makes up a man internally. We see the exterior. We love what we see on women, but we don't know what's going on inside of them. What's the jet fuel that's creating their emotional being, how they make decisions, why they say things the way they do, why they don't do things the way they do. And the same thing for men. And what I found out is it's all in the chemicals. And that's one of the main sources, or one of the main chapters of my presentation. I call it, it's all in the chemicals. Women run off of estrogen, which is a completely different chemical than what men run off of, which is testosterone. Now, there's other chemicals in the body too, but those are the two main chemicals. When you start understanding why women act the way they do, it's not because they're women, it's because what's going on inside of them. Their brains, our brains, you and I, male brains, are swimming in these chemicals, and they affect how we think, how we act, how we react, how we look at things, how we make decisions. It's a huge, huge factor. And so that's why I say I go deeper, because I want men and women to understand, well, this is why he says the things he does. This is why she talks so much. This is why he has a short attention span. There's reasons. It doesn't just happen. So we start off deep. We go there, and then we look at the love languages. We also look at the languages that men speak, which is masculines, and we look at the language that women speak, which is femme speak, and we look at the characteristics. And when all that starts to come together, now things are starting to make sense. As they say, you never graduate from the school of woman. You will never understand women completely, but you'll have a much better idea. And by the way, they appreciate it when they see that you are making an effort. It scores big points. It separates you from 99% of the other guys. If you're single and if you're looking to meet girls, if you know some of these things, and I'm not talking about pickup lines. There's lots of people on YouTube that have these shows that talk about pickup lines. I'm not talking about that. Once a woman sees that you really understand her, that you're actually listening to her and you're not trying to fix things right away, these are some of the things that we teach, she just naturally gravitates towards you. And you don't have to have a six-pack, and you don't have to be 6'5" and look like, Brad Pitt. It's amazing what women will put up with as long as they have these other characteristics that are coming from you.
Were you searching for this in your life, Joseph, to enhance your own personal relationship?
In my own personal relationship?
Yeah, because what we do is what we're searching for an answer for ourselves. I wonder, was that something you were searching for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be much of a teacher if I didn't have my own personal views on what I want for myself. And that's the other thing. The beauty of this is that I do tons of research. I've probably put in hundreds of hours of research now, and I'm finding out all kinds of different things. And now I have a better idea of what I need in a woman. The caveat, though, the bad part of it is now I'm very picky. and women should be picky too, by the way. There are a lot. One of the things that I teach in the class is that there are relationships that you should not get into, and how to figure out which relationships you should give a shot at, because you do have to give it a shot. You're not going to know right away. But there are relationships that you should definitely stay away from, just from a couple of red flags that come up. And Aron, by the time you're 25, 30, you don't change your spots. You stay pretty much the same. So if you see a pattern in somebody that is not going to work for you, don't think that you're going to change them. I'll get back to where I am too, but there's a comedian, I forget her name now, and she says in one of her jokes, she says, when men see red flags in a woman, they run for the hills. When a woman sees red flags in a man, she says to herself, I can fix that. And I have told this to several women, and they crack and they said, you are exactly right. And it's true. But the thing of it is that people don't change their spots. So there are relationships that once you see that, you let it go. You go on to the next person and you expand. Now, for me, what I've done is I'm looking for a very particular type of woman. I'm not looking for the trophy wife that has, she's just absolutely gorgeous and people are fainting as she walks by. But of course, you have to be attracted to that person first. Man is very visual. Women are visual too. They don't like to say they are. They don't like to admit it as much, but they are. But as a man, I have to be attracted to her, and then I have to be attracted to what's inside of her. And if you can find a woman who's supportive, who listens to you, who wants to be there for you, and is not more onto her own, you have struck gold. They're harder and harder to find, and that's what I'm looking for. That's why I said earlier I'm more picky now, because there's no sense of getting into a relationship that is not going to work out. The whole idea of being in a relationship is to make your life better, to make both of you, the two of you are better as a whole than separately, and that's the whole idea. So you've got to process that.
I guess you're one of those guys. You gotta be careful going into a bar, because you can see spots all the relationships and think, oh no, this is going to happen, that's going to happen in some way based on what you learned and what you're doing.
Well, sometimes we just have to learn the hard way, and I learned the hard way. I've been divorced. Okay, I've gone through that, and you want to talk about a learning curve. Boy, did I learn a lot about me. And I learned a lot about women eventually, because that was one of the reasons why I went into this. I wanted all the pain and suffering that I went through. First of all, number one, I don't want anybody to go through it, because going through a divorce is horrible. And number two, I wanted all that pain and suffering to account for something. Once I leave this planet, I won't be able to do that. So if I can prevent a divorce or you getting into a bad relationship or fixing a relationship, whatever it is, then all this pain and suffering that I went through is going to account for something. And that's really something that's very important to me.
Bar the relationship and having someone that you love, what else is important to you?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Bar the relationship and looking for a partner, what else is important for you and important to you?
I see. You mean in life in general?
Yeah, like what fires Joseph in his internal world to do what he does, kind of thing,
Aron, I do this exercise at the end of my presentations, and you're going to have to imagine with me. But I take off my belt, and people think, what is he doing? And I don't even tell them I'm going to do it. I take off my belt and I say, at this end, this is the tip. Okay. This is where this whole belt is going to represent your entire lifetime. The tip is where you were born. The end of the other side of the belt is your belt buckle. Naturally, that is where you pass away. That's where you're no longer around. I want you to imagine that you take your hand and move it down that belt line to about where you are in age. And if you're about halfway through your life, then you will be putting your hand on halfway along that belt. If you're beyond halfway, like some of us are, like me, you're going to move it on further over to the belt buckle, which is where you are no longer here. That puts in perspective how much time you have left to do what you want to do. Do you want to host a radio show like Aron? Do you want to do things like I do? Then you better get on it, because you have a set amount of time left. And that's assuming, Aron, if you still have your health, because you could still be alive. Give you an example. My brother had a heart operation. His doctor said, we need to operate because you've got a blockage and you're not going to be around much longer if you don't do it. He had the heart operation, and he was in good health, considering his age. He had the heart operation and he was fine, but he went to recoup in one of those homes where they recoup people, and he had a stroke. And so now he's still alive, but he can't do all the things that he used to be able to do. He can't drive a car when he wants to. Certain things people have to do for him, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And it's all different now. So what I'm saying is, you take that belt and you look at it and say, how much time do I have left in this world? And that really puts into perspective, hey, I better get on the stick here if there's something I really want to do. And that's one of the most important things that I think I teach, is that it kind of like upsets people at first. But do you want me to sugarcoat it, or do you want me to give you the truth? And this is the truth. You have X amount of time. You want to do something. You want to go on that cruise. You want to ask that girl out. You do it now. And if you fail, so what?
Joseph, if you could give, the 3 tips you've learned, or some piece of wisdom to enhance relationship, what would it be?
Well, the first thing I would say is, and this would, Aron, this would be with anything. Men were never trained to understand women. Women were never trained to understand men. Think about that. We're going all the way back to the beginning of history, to Adam and Eve. Nobody has ever really concentrated their efforts to train a man or train a woman to understand the opposite sex. You might get tips from your mother, your brother, the locker room, which is not a good place to get tips, by the way. But you're not getting a concentrated view. And that's one of the, you asked me about the military earlier. One of the reasons, or one of the things that I found so fascinating about the military is they train the heck out of you. They really do. And it's called boot camp for a reason. They assume that you don't know how to brush your teeth, that you don't know how to make up your bed, you don't know how to take care of your rifle. They assume that you know nothing. And that's the first thing that I would say most men and women need to understand. You really don't know the opposite sex. You've been given a couple of clues here and there. And of course, some of the older folks have more experience, and that's great. But has anybody ever really sat you down and explained to you why women do the things they do, why men act the way they do? How can you talk to them so that they are on the same language? So that would be number one. Number two is, you have to realize that there's 2 different languages going on. There's femme speak, that's what women speak, and the masculines. And they are not the same. They are 2 different communications. They're like 2 ships passing in the night. You might both speak English or Spanish or whatever the language is, but that's as close as it gets, bro. You're not really speaking her language. She's not really speaking your language. You have to have what I call a translator or a bridge. And that would be somebody like me that trains you to understand what is she really saying with that. Women will say, I'm fine. And you ask them, is everything okay, babe? I'm fine. No, they're not. There's all kinds of things that they could be really underneath. And the same thing for men. So if you start understanding that there's 2 languages, then you know that somebody has got to be a bridge or a translator. If you go to a foreign country, now I've gone to several foreign countries, but everybody speaks English pretty much. It's not a problem. Well, let's say that I went to Africa, and there was a group of people that spoke no English at all. How successful am I going to be with those people ordering food? Where's the bathroom? Give me a taxi. How am I going to communicate? If I don't have a translator, I'm in big trouble. And quite frankly, men and women don't understand. They are in trouble. They don't have a translator that helps them communicate. And that's where I come in, and that's what we do. And that's what's so fun, because the light starts going on in people's mind. Oh, now I see why she feels that way. Now I understand why he got so upset when I didn't show him respect. And by the way, there's certain things that are etched in stone. Men have to have, before they have love, their number one need is respect. Women, their number one need is love. And when you tell a woman that men need respect more than love, they don't understand it, because that's not where they're coming from. They come from love. He needs respect. Number 2 is love, or 3 even. So these are some of the things that I feel that people really need to understand. And once you do, then things start to even out a little bit. They're going to be perfect? No, we're totally imperfect. And as I said, you never graduate from the school of woman. They're very, very complex things.
Joseph, where can people find more about you to understand and to experience if they're having anything, relationship problems, or want to enhance their relationship anyway?
Oh, thanks. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I have a website. You see it there on the screen, it looks like, and it looks like you put up the Q. Glassslippercommunications.com. It's a long one, glassslippercommunications.com. If you forget, just think of Cinderella. The whole idea behind it was that a man must walk in the shoes of a woman, and a woman must walk in the shoes of man to really understand what's going on. And that's where the name came from, glassslippercommunications.com. And while you're there, I have an ebook that you're welcome to download. It's called Thought Starters, and it's got a lot of good information about relationships. It also has some great just life in general information. And then from there, we can book an exploratory call. I have a separate email address. It's tony@glassslippercommunications.com. You can contact me, and if we want to talk about doing a summit or speaking or one-on-one. I don't really do one-on-one so much. What I do is more class type of things, or things like this with you.
Excellent, Joseph. Man, thank you so much. We spent hours talking about you and what you do and so on, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Aron. I can't believe it's already over with. So, and thank you to your producer. He's a great guy.
There we go, everybody. Remember, like, subscribe, and smash that like button and comment, because your opinions matter most. But hey, just shows you from, being on stage, being on the microphone every week, and now he helps people be educated and their translator of what makes the love go on between the man and the woman, and the kind of the middle of the Venn diagram. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. UK time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, to hear some incredible guests to figure out who, what, where, why, when, and what makes them the superstar. And remember, you rock on and take care. Chat soon.
Thank you for listening to the Aron O'Dowd Show, where the world's best stories are told. If you like, please post a review or subscribe to the show. To find out more, contact us at aronodowd.com. That's ARONODOWD.com. We're always ready to share another magnificent tale from the world's best storytellers. So stay tuned.